So this is a re-recording of the code sections from the Fundamentals of Components webinar. We had technical issues with the recording quality. So the introduction and the synopsis in that presentation is still definitely important to listen to. This will replace most of the interior of the the code-based content outside of questions. But I'm going to go through the same steps. Be slightly different, but by and large accomplish the same thing. So we started with what is a component. And a component is basically a self-contained interface page that includes JavaScript and CSS, and it can be moved as a package between different projects, even between different developers, and it maintains its functionality ideally regardless of what environment you build it in and use it in. It's important to understand that there's two different aspects to the topic of components. There's the web component, which is the functionality, the actual interface and code, and then there's a component widget, and that's the widget you add to your interface page that's basically a placeholder for the web component. We're going to cover that a little bit more going forward, and you'll see how we build them and when you use the different aspects. But before we go on, it's important to know the benefits of using components. There's basically four real major benefits. Reuse of your code and is the most important, I think. Not only are you reusing your JavaScript, but you're also reusing the interface element, so you can build a component that's got a somewhat dynamic interface. You can use it in many different projects, many different pages in the same project, share them with other developers, and if you're using them in many different pages in one project, if you make a change, it's reflected everywhere. That leads to less work as well. You're not maintaining several different instances of similar functionality. You can wrap it all in a component and be sure that the changes are reflected everywhere. The other benefit is modularity. You're going to put a component, it's going to be a self-contained piece of code, so you can be more free to experiment. You can break something and it will be confined to that component. You're not going to go destroy larger sections of your project as a result of what you did in your component. It's all self-contained and modular. You can organize yourself quite nicely. You'll see further on, I'm going to review the project, but essentially you're not bound to a specific page structure in your web folder. You can store components where you like, in the folders you like, group them how you like, and you reference them dynamically and they're loaded into a page. So you have a lot more flexibility for organizing your code. The final major benefit is efficiency. You'll see some of the basic functions of a component is loading new views into a component widget dynamically, and this can be mimicked using, say for instance, the widget show and hide functions. So you had 5 different views that you wanted to load into a similar main page area. You could flip them out by using, hiding 4 of them and showing 1, or you could overlap them and change the Z index. The difference here is that when you have all of those views on one page and you're doing show and hide, is all the elements from that interface are in the DOM, and they're going to take a toll, when you get to a certain level on your I have a slow computer here, sorry I didn't see that. They're going to take a toll on the performance of your browser. So a component actually loads the DOM elements in dynamically and replaces them, so you don't get this bogged down browser. So there's the benefits. Now let's do an overview of what components can do. I've got a pre-built interface here. I've put checked or dotted lines around the component widget so you can see exactly where the components lie. This Fundamentals of Components is actually a component widget or a web component that I've built. So we're going to load, let's load the company view. and you can see that dynamically it'll pop a new view in there. Without this outline, you can't even tell that it's loaded dynamically, that it's anything other than an interface page that's completely integrated. We're going to bring up the console here, and you can do things with a component widget that you can do with other widgets. So the idea of this component widget is component 1. So I'll demonstrate this. We can do a set height. Just like any other widget, we'll set it to 250. Let's do resizable, and we'll do true. So now it will be resizable. So now we have a resizable. You can even do things like set background color. So if you're familiar with containers at all, you'll see that this is all things that can be done with a container as well. It's more of a layout element. I guess you could even make it draggable. And when that's one aspect is the hold on. So now we've got a draggable, resizable. So just like a container, and that's one big element of components. Is it's great for layout, great for grouping different elements together, but there's a whole lot more to it. So here's one. Let's refresh this so we're back to our original view. So we're on the person view right now, and we can just one click change in between views, load the company view, load the employee view, and it'll swap these views in and out. Like I said, the DOM will be modified with each load. So I'll go to the employees view. Now right here I have another component nested inside of this original red outline component, and you're going to see it's I click through here, it's going to load the component. So this is a gold member component, and it's nested within, and as we go through a platinum member, you can see that there's different components for each one. You can do things like let's reference this nested child component. So it'll be component 1, and I'll go through how the IDs work later. Component 1 underscore member actions dot get children, and that's going to list all of the widgets within there. Now if we go to a gold member, it's got a different set of child widgets. I'll do the same thing. You can see that the return values here are different, so you can, just like a container, get the child widgets. So there's some of the benefits of a component. As you can see, you can load things in and out. You can take smaller elements of your interface, and the other big benefit is here in people, I've got the exact same component working in both of these interfaces. So I've made it once, used it twice, and saved myself a lot of time. And if I make a change to these membership action components, it'll be reflected in both views. Let's go to the project here. I'll just do a quick overview. I've got 4 folders, 1 through 4. Those are the sections we're going to be covering. Within each of those is an example or two. I have a components folder, which I'm going to recommend you do as well. Is when you first thing you do is create, you could call it views, you could call it components, whatever you like, but I would put all of your components into one folder and then create a structure within there. You can see I've got a subfolder with those different member action components, and then the 3 person, employer, and company view, and then a dialog, which I'm going to show you later as well. So that's the project overview. We're going to go into example 2 now. We're going to create some components. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a component widget, which is right here, and you can do that the same as with any widget. You can drag it on, you can double click, or you can click and drag for size. And essentially we're going to leave this, it has an ID, it has some properties. We're going to make this one draggable and resizable, and this is a frame. Now here's the other thing we're going to do is you can size these just like a container. I'm going to constrain proportions here, and so that will stretch with the page when you resize the browser, and this is essentially the area that the web component we're about to create will be loaded into. So this acts and is referenced just like a widget because it is a widget. We're going to go to the project. You can create a web component either in the action menu or by right-clicking or doing the contextual menu, new web component. We're going to give this a name, my component. Create. And you'll see it's created a component with the 3 interior elements. A CSS will be added once we start putting interface elements on here. So it's just like an interface page. I'm going to put a container up top. We'll pretend that it's a header, and I'm going to size that, constrain it horizontally so it will stretch with the component. So the actual page is equivalent to the frame of the component widget. So when we drew that widget on our main interface page, it was only this big, so you need to plan this layout to work with that. So you try and keep it flexible. Sometimes you can't, but let's just to illustrate, let's bring the person class here, take a couple out, and we'll create a form, and I'll just create a nice long interface for us. We're going to put it right there. We're going to save this. Okay, so we've made our web component. It's as simple as that. You can see the CSS was added, so it's all self-contained. Go back to the example one. So this is our main interface page. I'm going to click on our component widget and go to properties, and you'll see we have a place to put a path. So you can just type ahead. We called it my component. So this is the one we just created. This is for further sections in this presentation, but it'll find the components you have. You click, it fills it in. We'll save, run this example, and now you can see our component loaded in. It's resizable, and you'll notice that it does mask unless you specifically put scroll bars or do something else. And you can see the top here is scaling with the size of the component widget, not the page it was loaded into. So it's, again, a container. It's like a container in that way. Now let's take a look at the other benefit. We'll take this widget component that we have in our interface page. I'm going to copy and paste. Now you see we have 2. And let's also go back into, we'll save that. So we now have 2 instances of the component widget. Let's go into the web component itself and change the background color of this header to gray. And save. Now we'll go back to the browser and run that. Just size this so I can switch, and we'll refresh. Now we have 2 instances of draggable components. Oh, I didn't make this one draggable. Anyhow, we've got one draggable and resizable and the other one static, but you can see they're acting independently. They both have the changes we made, which was the color to the header, so we now have those changes reflected in 2 places. We could have made the second instance here, it was draggable and resizable. I'll have to figure out what happened there. Let's try it again. Save, refresh. Let's just fix this. Okay, there. So I don't know what happened there. I must not have saved it properly. So we've got 2 draggables, and again, changes get reflected in both, which will save you a lot of time and keep your application consistent. Sorry about that, I had a little bump. So I'm going to delete one of these widget component widgets. I'm going to go back to one. I just wanted to show you on the topic of path how you can have a fully realized path which references from the web folder context, and that's when you start with a leading forward slash. If I were to just put in my component .wa component, it doesn't, the type ahead doesn't do this for you, but you can put that value in, and this will come later when we're actually specifying paths. This then references it relative from the location of your example. So if you wanted to make things a little more modular, you could use this as well. When we save and run, you'll see that it still works fine. So that's how you do the path. Next, we're going to go into loading components, and I'll go into the first example here. I did cover loading by default, which is the first option. We've got a component widget here selected with load by default and a path specified. So if we were to run this page, which we will do, it just loads up by default. You've seen that. The next thing you can do is, say for instance we didn't want it to load up immediately on the pages, you can take off load by default, save, and refresh, and it will not load. But in a button or in any other fashion, you can then reference the component, component1 dot load component, and it's going to use that path you had specified in the in the GUI, in the path property here, just by calling load. Now the more typical way is we leave the path empty, and then we call, let's do it in one of these buttons. Let's load the company component. We have no path in the component. There's no preset. We're going to go into events, on click, and let's load a specific component. Let's load, well, we could load this one, which we just did, but let's get into our components folder. I'm going to load, we did company, so let's do the company view. So we'll reference the component, component1 dot load component, and this time we're going to pass a path, so slash components, which is the folder, slash company view dot wa component, and when we save, we'll do the same thing for employees. So I'll go to the on click of the employees, and we can just copy and paste this code. It's very similar. Change this to employee view, and now when we click on those buttons, they'll load the components. So we'll run this example again. Did not load by default when I click company. When we click company, in comes the company view. When we click employees, in comes the employee view, and they're both fully operational as you would expect. So that's loading with a path. To demonstrate this just one step further, let's bring up the console and let's reference the nested component and load in a different member action component. So component1 underscore member actions, which is the name of the nested component, dot load component, and then we need to find the path, which is components slash its category views. So category views, I go back to the browser, slash, and I know the name of them, but I'm just going to show you. So let's load in, we've got platinum there, let's load in gold instead. Now by convention, path or components are named like this, employee one, lower camel case. I chose to go off convention and make these capitalized from the beginning because my categories here, which you can't see well, but these are all capitalized. So I'm actually just within this application, when I click here, I'm actually just using this data value from the data source and inserting it into a load component call like this. So when we do this, the gold will load up and replace the platinum. So now, as a quick aside, I've got an example 2 in loading, and the reason for this is you can actually use components as a custom dialog. So you can see here I've got Modular selected as an option. I've got a dialog web component selected, which is in here, and you can see that it's reflected. It's just a a mock-up dialog. In the button here, which I guess we could put close, so now the close button in the events on click, you can see I've just got component.remove component. So remove component takes a component out. We'll explain this $comp later, but essentially it's you reference the component widget and call remove component. So that's what the web component looks like. That's what. So the open dialog just does a load component, which you've already seen. So the big difference here is we're using the modal option on the web component, and I'll show you what happens with this. So we'll save. I don't think we need this one anymore. And let's run this example. So let's open. You can see it locks up the background just like the dialog widget if you've used that before, and show dialog, and then close. Open, close. So that's the other use of components if you use the modal, is you can make it into a dialog function. Okay, we're into section 4 now. Close this out. So section 4, scripting. So this is where we're going to cover the topics on keeping your components modular. A very important topic, definitely a best practice and something you want to pay attention to closely. The first thing to understand is to maintain unique IDs in the DOM that components are scoped using an underscore. So these, you saw that I did an underscore with the one nested component. What happens is it takes the ID of the first web component. This would be a better example right here to start with. If you had a widget inside of component 1, the ID in the DOM will be component1.SumWidget. So if you're going to reference it with the $method, you're going to need to pass a fully referenced ID. So if you want to access a widget from outside of a component, and I'll demonstrate this, you need to understand that you'll need to use the fully realized ID. And likewise, if you had it nested at more than one level, it would take the first component, the second parent component, and prepend everything with this. So the best way to demonstrate this is we're going to break something first. So to demonstrate this, we'll bring up the people view. We'll use this as our example. I'll bring up the console, and I'm going to show you physically how the IDs are affected. So let's look at the widgets within this component 1, which is the red frame. So if we go to elements, and we'll go to body, and inside of body is our component. So we've got component 1 here. Now you'll see everything inside of the component that's a widget is now prepended with component 1. So the data grid is, the full ID is now component1.datagrid because it's inside of a component. And this continues on. If we were to go down to and find the nested component, this may take me a second. Text field, combo box, here we are. So here's the component membership actions. We'll open that component, and you'll see within that component we now have a double nested metaphor on the in the ID. So component 1 membership actions, and then title, it would be how you would reference this particular widget. So with that in mind, let's add some functionality to the person view. So I'm going to go back to Studio, we'll go into the person view, open up the HTML, and what I want is I want a search function. So we're going to grab a text input, we'll constrain it to the right side so it will size properly, and we'll change the label to search, and we'll give it an ID of search. So we now have a search box, and we're going to want to do some functionality on the on key up. So we'll search, do a query every time the on key up happens. So I'm going to write this code with fully qualified IDs because we know that will always work. If you ever, it's a good technique in bug testing to use the fully realized IDs because you know that they're consistent, they'll always work, but they are not a best practice. Unless the component is a single use, it's only ever going to be used in that context, then you can do that. So we are going to sorry, one thing I should have showed you as well, let's go back to the browser for a second, is I've got some local data sources. We'll go to console, and I don't know if you've ever just typed in sources. That will show you all of your data sources for the page. As you can see, data sources are also scoped based on the component structure, so you don't get duplication of source widgets or sources as well. So we're going to actually query one of the sources. So we're going to go sources dot component1 underscore person, and I believe that's the name of the, yes, component1 person dot query, and then we'll go last name equals parameter1 comma, and we'll pass in the value of that text input, the search text input. Now it's inside of component1, so component1 underscore search dot get value. So now we're searching for, or querying, the last name, so it's the person data source inside component1. We're going to query last name is equal to the value of search, which is inside of component1 as well, dot get value. So let's save that. Sorry, I forgot to put in a wildcard. Of course, not going to get anything like that, so get value plus, let's put in the wildcard, so we'll find anything that starts with our search, not equal our search. Let's reload. So people, and let's put in a search, so everyone with a B, everyone with a BE. So this is working. Now in design we decided, we'll go back to Studio and we'll go to our layout page. We decide this is called component1. I actually want to call this main, just because it was generically named. Now I want it to be main. Okay, and we'll save this. We'll go back to the browser and reload and bring up people. First off, that doesn't work because we changed the name of the component. So let's fix our people button. Events on click, that's fine. So this is now main. Now obviously the other ones will be broken as well, but let's just fix this one button to illustrate. Now we'll go back, reload. So we fixed our one button, and let's do our search. B, E, and you can see it's not working. Now here's the problem. I can understand using the hard references here because you're somewhat forced to. You could do things to work around that as well, but the whole point of web components is to keep them modular. So we need a way, like if we were to pass this component to another project or another developer, we've hard-coded the name of the parent component, which is a problem because you can never predict what that is. If you're going to use it in multiple places, you can't have the name of the parent component twice to be the same. So there's ways to get around this. The first one can only be used in the constructor, and it's a function called getHTMLID. And essentially what that does is it allows you to take only the ID relative to the component. So within person view web component, this widget's ID here is search. So we don't have any knowledge of the parent. We can call getHTMLID, wrap search with that, and what it's going to do is it's going to determine the parent and prepend search with it. So that will return the fully realized. So that statement there is equivalent to what we had there before, except it's done in a modular way. The other place we need to fix is the sources. So we're going to take out the scoping, component 1, and we're going to prepend this with $comp. So that will scope it. We'll scope the sources to just the local ID. So we'll save that. We'll go to the browser, reload, load people. So you can see now it works even though we renamed the parent component. It's all modular, it's working from within. We could change the name of that component again, and again, and it wouldn't affect the web component internally. So now the other topic I wanted to cover was with this $comp. This essentially references the web component that this is operating within. So if I went, say, in the onload, and I did var the component equals this, and I put in so we'll put in a debugger, and then let's go into the key up here, and let's put in var the component 2, so just another variable 2 equals this. And the this keyword is useful in particular in the constructor, but I'm going to show you two different things here, and we'll put a debugger here as well. So let's run this in the browser and let's get these debuggers going. So the first one that's going to trigger is in the constructor. So we'll reload. I got to bring up the developer tools. We'll load people. Here's our first debugger. So we're going to do var the component equals this. Well, I guess we don't even need that. Let's compare. So we're going to put in $comp, and we're going to put in this. And these are, you'll see, this references the main component, the component with main as the ID. $comp, whoops, I deleted that. $comp references the exact same thing. $comp is the component, and you can see that where is it? Oh, here's where $comp was assigned. So of course it's getting the ID of the local component. Now here's the thing, when we continue past, so that's in the constructor, they're equivalent. Let's see what happens when we're in an onKeyUp event. So we'll put in a B, and here's our second debugger. Now let's look at the values of this. This is now main underscore search. This now references this widget, and $comp still references main. So $comp can also be used as a way to reference the component itself from within widgets in the component. This will be scoped to the widget, but $comp will remain with the component. So that's it for the fundamentals of components. I will say we're going to do a follow-up webinar. It's going to cover some more advanced topics, but you definitely want to master the concepts here before watching that webinar, because I'm not going to repeat much of this here. But I'll give you a brief overview of the topics we're going to cover. We're going to cover scope. I'm going to show you how and where to include different JavaScript files so that they work within components, and understanding what's accessible outside the component, what's accessible inside the component, and how all of that works. We're going to talk about initializing components by sending in user data on the load. So you could maybe have a title in a component that gets set by the load function, which I'll show you some ideas there. We're going to talk about creating component widgets dynamically, so you could actually create the physical widget on the fly. Could be useful in many different ways, in particular in a tab-based interface. We're going to add custom functions to a component, so you could call something like, let's take this example here. component one dot your function, and you could put whatever functionality you want in this function, but still call it with this convenient syntax. So I'm going to show you how to implement custom components or custom functions on a component. We're going to talk about best practices to keep the components modular. There's more steps you can take to optimize that. We're going to talk about local versus global data sources, and I'm going to give you some information on different quirks with components. There's some things that maybe you wouldn't assume, but just some point out a couple quirks, give you some tips and just some suggestions in how to use them in an everyday basis. And then we're going to talk about sharing components across projects and some things you can do with that. And maybe I might even cover your options as far as if you did want to offer commercial components, how you might be able to approach that. I don't know that they can ever be 100% secure like a compiled component, but there are some methods you could take if that was your desire. So I appreciate it. We'll talk soon, and I look forward to seeing you at the second webinar.